Welcome to Beyond Education, the podcast that explores the fascinating connection between knowing yourself and learning effectively. I'm Monica, and in these bite-sized episodes, we'll dive deeper into the insights that transform how we think about learning and education. Today, we're tackling something that so many of us have experienced: forcing learning. You know, when you try to cram something into your brain, push harder, stay up later, grind through the struggle, and still somehow nothing sticks. But what if I told you that forcing learning is the reason it's not working? Let's talk about why pushing harder doesn't help and what actually does. You ever try to force a square peg into a round hole? At first, you push gently, hoping it'll fit. Then you add a little more pressure, and before you know it, you're hammering that thing with sheer willpower. But the harder you push, the more resistance you create. The peg doesn't magically reshape itself, it just gets stuck. Learning works the same way. The harder you force information into your brain, the more it fights back. You don't retain it, you get exhausted, and suddenly learning feels like a punishment rather than an exciting process. And this isn't just about school. Think about the last time you had to learn a new tool at work, take on a new skill, or even read a book you thought you should be reading but couldn't get through. If you had to push yourself harder, it probably felt like dragging a boulder uphill. But learning doesn't have to feel this way. Let's take a step inside your brain for a moment. Imagine you're trying to juggle too many things at once: emails, deadlines, messages popping up. And now you're trying to absorb something new. It feels overwhelming, right? That's because your brain has a limit on how much information it can process at any given time. If you overload it, it starts dropping the ball. That's called cognitive overload. And it's one reason why cramming doesn't work. Now let's add stress to the mix. You're under pressure, maybe trying to meet a deadline or feeling like you should be learning faster. Your brain isn't just struggling with information, it's going into survival mode. And guess what happens when your brain feels stressed? It prioritizes keeping you safe, not helping you retain knowledge. That's why when you try to force learning, your brain often pushes back. And then there's the myth we've all believed at some point, that if we just try harder, we'll learn faster. But learning isn't about brute force, it's about working with how our brains naturally absorb and process information. So if forcing learning doesn't work, what does? Let's think about a time when learning felt easy, when you picked up something without even realizing it. Maybe you got obsessed with a new hobby, or you learned song lyrics just by listening over and over. That wasn't an accident, that was your brain learning efficiently. So what makes learning feel natural? First, small intentional steps. Instead of cramming for hours, think of learning like sipping coffee. It's better in small, steady doses. That's why microlearning, short bursts of focused learning, is way more effective than marathon study sessions. Then there's self-directed learning, giving yourself the freedom to explore what interests you. Ever noticed how much easier it is to remember something when you chose to learn it? That's because autonomy fuels motivation. When people get to shape their learning experience, whether it's in a workplace setting or personal growth, it actually sticks. Another powerful tool: spacing things out. Think of how you remember a song, not because you listened to it once for 2 hours, but because you heard it in short moments over time. Revisiting material in small chunks allows your brain to store and reinforce it. So instead of thinking, I need to learn this now, try revisiting it again tomorrow and then next week. It'll stay with you longer. And let's not forget the power of learning with others. When you talk about something, teach it to someone, or engage in a discussion, it naturally becomes more memorable. This is why peer learning, whether in the workplace, through mentorship, or in casual conversations, can make such a difference. Oh, and one last thing: relax. Ever struggle to remember a word only to have it pop into your head when you stop thinking about it? Your brain keeps processing information even when you're not actively learning. So taking breaks, letting information settle, and even sleeping on it can do more for your learning than hours of forced focus. So next time you catch yourself thinking, I just need to push harder, pause. Ask yourself, what if I worked with my brain instead of against it? Think about a time when learning felt easy. Maybe when you were diving into a hobby, playing a game, or just exploring a topic you were genuinely curious about. That's your brain's natural learning system at work. And we can tap into that more often if we stop forcing learning and start designing it smarter. So here's a challenge. Try just one of these strategies this week. Maybe take shorter, more intentional learning breaks, or experiment with peer discussions. See what happens when you don't force it. And if this episode got you thinking, I'd love to hear your insights. So let's connect via one of my socials. Check the description. Until next time, remember, learning isn't about pushing harder. It's about making it work for you.